Impeachment number 2 officially underway. Johnson & Johnson CEO says that we're likely going to need COVID vaccinations every year. And is audio the next big thing in social media? Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Wednesday, February 10th. I am Jill Wagner. Carlo is off this morning, but I'm here with Eugene Daniels, White House correspondent for Politico and also the co-author of the Politico Playbook, which I often quote here on this podcast, Eugene. Thank you so much for getting up early with us.
Thanks so much for having me. With Playbook, we're up early anyway, so it's better to spend it doing something else instead of walking around my apartment. I'm still getting used to people saying those titles for me. It's still it's only been like a month. It's still so weird.
You probably feel very important, as you should. I should note,
No.
I'm so excited you're on. I became a huge fan. I don't know if you remember, I interviewed you, I think, for the first time during the primary season, and you described Elizabeth Warren as having a hot girl summer. And I was like, he has me. That is my kind of analysis.
I remember that. No, I remember that. I love coming on Cheddar. You guys were the first people to put me on TV. So I was like, I have to always do whatever I can for Cheddar. They're my faves.
All right. Well, let's get started. It's actually a huge week politically because we are talking impeachment number 2 for Donald Trump. So day 1 of the second impeachment trial was heavy on legal history and technicalities. Ultimately, though, the senators affirmed the constitutionality of impeaching a former president. The vote was 56-44, so that means 6 Republicans broke ranks and they voted with Democrats. The prosecution made an emotional case for Trump's culpability in inciting the violent riots at Capitol Hill. They showed a 13-minute video montage of the rioters themselves interlaced with the president's own words. The defense team, meanwhile, calling the impeachment politically motivated. They stressed how it would set a bad precedent for future presidents. So the trial resumes today. Each side's going to get up to 16 hours to make their case. Your takeaways, Eugene, from day 1?
Yeah, could you imagine having 16 hours to make a case? That's exhausting. Anyway, I just can't imagine being one of these lawyers. There are a few takeaways, right? The first is that the House impeachment managers, the Democrats, were praised by almost everyone, Republicans, Democrats, media, for nailing it. Representative Jamie Raskin, who is the head honcho over there, made this really, like you said, emotional appeal. What's weird here in this impeachment trial, out of a lot of things that are weird, the weirdest thing is that the senators are not just the judge or the jury, they're also witnesses, right? Like to what happened on January 6th. And so the personal appeal from Jamie Raskin about how, his daughter, and his son-in-law were at the Capitol on January 6th, and now his daughter doesn't want to come back. Like all of these things, they hit hard because it's a reminder of how bad and scary and horrible that day was, right? For members of both chambers, their aides, our colleagues in journalism. We had, Politico had our members of our congressional team there, family members of these lawmakers, the vice president, the then vice president. And Raskin did a good job of pulling on those heartstrings, right? That video had butted the speech from President Trump, the insurrectionist saying, like, let's go take the Capitol as he was speaking, and watching members of Congress, including some of those senators that are going to have to vote to evacuate, right? Democrats kind of pre-butted the argument that we know that Trump lawyers are trying to make, which is that this is an unconstitutional trial because the Trump lawyers say that you can't do this to someone who's no longer a sitting president. However, that is not settled law, right? Something from the Congressional Research Service, which is this nonpartisan group that looks at things, said that most scholars who have looked at the question concluded that Congress does have the authority to extend the impeachment process to officials who aren't in office. It's happened before. And so Democrats are looking to have Republicans own this and not just focus on the Constitution. Now, the Trump attorneys, it was so if you were watching like many of journalists, it was just like very confusing. It left, I think, a lot to be desired. Bruce Castor kind of got up there. He was the first Trump lawyer, and he actually even admitted that he was kind of having to change what he was going to say because of how good the Democrats were. It was just like, you've been there as someone doing a presentation, like, oh, the other kid was so good, now I have to do something separate, something completely different. It was meandering, it was confusing, it was really hard to follow. It felt at times that he was like stalling. I don't know if you watch like The Good Wife or shows with lawyers. Like I always think about like the lawyer sitting up there and just kind of going, waiting for the investigator to bring them the document to like, that's kind of like the trump card. That's what it felt like. And then David Schoen, the other lawyer, he was a little better, but he really focused on saying that this was about making sure that President Trump couldn't run again in 2024. Republicans wanted cover from these two lawyers. They did not get it. They still voted how they voted. But they did not get what they really wanted, which is like a sound, this is unconstitutional argument from the Trump side. And that is not what they get. The House managers didn't even do a rebuttal after they talked. They were like, you know what, I'm good. Actually, I'll let him speak for his stuff. They didn't have to do that. And something to remember is like, none of this kind of matters, right? Like, I don't know if this argument couldn't break through. It's hard to see what argument could during this process. And we're probably going to see President Trump be acquitted here in days.
So on the issue of former President Trump, we used to have this window into his world because he was basically live tweeting his entire day. And so the previous impeachment, we kind of knew what he was thinking. There was some reporting that he's furious at how his defense did yesterday. But he's been banned from Twitter. He's been banned from most social media at this point. What do we know about what's going on behind closed doors? Do we know, is he watching this trial? Like, is he glued to the TV right now? I know you guys have some reporting about what he has been up to post-presidency.
Yeah. He's definitely watching, right? Like, this is a president who, even while he was president, was watching a lot of television, right? He comes from that world. He comes from the world of reality TV. He knows what a good TV moment is, and he knows and let people know he did not get it. This is not just about a constitutional argument for President Trump. This is also kind of PR, right? He wants to continue to hold the keys to the GOP car. He wants to be in charge. He wants to be the kingmaker. And it's hard for him to do that when his lawyers are up there embarrassing him. And he was really, really pissed about that. We know that and we've reported that he was kind of yelling at the TV while it was happening, very upset with Castor, who had that weird meandering situation happening on there. And he knows that his brand cannot be persona non grata, right? Like, he needs something. He needs Republicans to like, that are looking for that cover to be able to have it and to be able to say this was unconstitutional and not have to answer the question about whether they felt that the president did something wrong here, which many of them said he did, right? We had many of Republicans in the House as well, but in the Senate who were like, the president had some responsibility here. So now those same people are looking to vote not to convict. So they're in a tough spot. Something I keep seeing is people, like you were saying about like that window into what he's thinking, is that it would be nice to know what he's thinking right now. Cause like, could you imagine the live tweeting that could be happening if he was still allowed on Twitter, right? Like it'd be kind of wild to just watch this as it happened. Except now we have to do a lot more because he's not on Twitter. So
be careful what you wish for, Americans.
Exactly. You wanted him off Twitter, and now he is.
So, the other thing that, of course, is that this is happening in the backdrop of a huge health crisis, an economic crisis. The country is in a pretty bad place. So yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, he had a press conference trying to basically say they're going to be able to do this impeachment trial while working on COVID relief at the same time, saying, we got this. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Can they? I mean, I don't know. This is taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room.
It is, and it will. And I just want to say for the record, Congress is not good at walking and chewing gum at the same time. They can barely chew gum while sitting. I think that's really important to remember is that, they claim they can do that, but that's not what DC has been about for years, right? Like they can usually only focus on one thing. I I think the Biden administration is really hoping to stay out of this, stay above the fray, stay focused. So they're pushing the Senate to be able to do both, right? So there's going to be a lot of pressure from administration officials, from the president himself, to say, we still need to focus on this COVID relief bill. We promised people these things. We're also still waiting for the president's cabinet to be fully confirmed, right? So there's a lot that the Senate has to do. I think depending on Schumer really thinks he can get this done, right? He's talked about how his committee chairs are going to handle this business. And that's kind of where we are right now with the COVID relief bill, right there. The committee chairs have to do their thing. They have to continue to have negotiations. We still don't have a final bill yet. And there were concerns from jump about, even like as soon as it was like, oh, President Trump's going to have a trial in the Senate, even about the confirmations. They have been able to get some of those confirmations done, right? We've seen some of those. And so now Democrats are promising that they're going to be able to do that. And it's hard to believe, but because also how do you negotiate with Republicans who are also still so upset about the fact that they're having this trial? So it's all about, a lot of this is political theater, and trying to make the American people feel like, hey, don't worry, everything's fine, which is what President Biden has been promising for years when he ran for president, and now in his first days and month. Has it been a month yet? It's hard to tell.
It feels like it's been,
it feels like he's been president for 62 years.
I have about 7,000 more questions about impeachment, but I do want to get to the latest on what's going on with the pandemic and coronavirus. We are well over a year after this virus first appeared in China, and the World Health Organization now concluding that the coronavirus pandemic did not originate in a Chinese lab, as some have speculated and as some conspiracy theorists have speculated. Instead, this team of international and Chinese scientists doubled down on this more commonly held belief that the virus made the jump at some point from animals to humans. Meanwhile, in the U.S., COVID-19 deaths soaring in the Hispanic communities, 55% above the national rate. The Biden administration announcing a concerted push to deliver vaccines to underserved areas through a network of federally funded clinics. And Johnson & Johnson CEO Alex Gorksy saying what most of us had already thought. Carlo and I have talked about this a lot already on the podcast, but he's basically saying people are likely going to need to get vaccinated against COVID-19 every year, kind of like the flu shot. So we talk about the first 100 days of a presidency very often, but this is looking more and more likely like COVID is something that Biden is going to be dealing with, Eugene, for his whole first term.
Yeah. First of all, I will take whatever shot I need to take to get out of this apartment. Whenever, however many years they need me to do it, I will take this shot, this vaccine. I am ready and willing and able. If someone wants to give me a vaccine right this moment.
Wait, I actually have thought, sign me up for the clinical trials at this point, because I'm if that's what it's going to take for me to get the vaccine, I'm on board. If you want to test how much or whatever, that's okay.
Exactly. No, I'm pro vaccine, and we all are here on this podcast. I did a story recently about this and kind of about these underserved areas, and the first 100 days, the most of the Biden presidency are going to be full of the impact and the effects of COVID-19, right? All the health experts are saying, by the summer and the fall, everyone should be vaccinated who wanted to be vaccinated. They've made some other promises, but I think the ones that I talked to, they say probably end of summer, beginning of fall, we might be going into work, which I don't know how to put on real pants again, right? I'm wearing sleeping pants right now with the sweater. And so life will get back to a little bit of what we were used to. But there's all this effects of this recession, right? The stimulus package that they need to get passed and figure out how to help Americans all over the country who still haven't got their jobs. Kind of this, something that when I talk to doctors is this psychological thing. How do you go to the office again, even though knowing everyone might be vaccinated? How do you get on the metro with all these people? How do you go back into normal days of, going to concerts and going to movies? And so all of this is going to be something that President Biden and his administration are going to have to deal with. And there are still all these access issues, right? There are still all these issues of access to Black and Brown communities who have been hit the hardest, and we know they haven't been getting the vaccine. So a lot of what the vice president, the president and the vice president are going to have to do is one, convince people, Black and Brown people who have some of that vaccine hesitancy because of historical mistreatment by the healthcare community. They have to convince them to get the vaccine, that it's okay. That's, the PR campaign. But then there's the getting them the actual shots, right? There aren't pharmacies and hospitals in every Black and Brown community. So they're trying to figure out, okay, you don't have a CVS, what can we do? So they're thinking about doing these kind of mobile vaccine areas, all of these other things. And the way that the Biden administration is thinking about almost everything has this through line of equity. And so that means every single thing that they're going to do is going to be a little bit more difficult, right? Because you have to be a little more targeted. You're going to get hit for, preferential treatment to minorities, which isn't a thing considering the historic issues that we've dealt with in this country. And so it's going to take up this whole first term of his and possibly the next term of the next president. We have no idea, because what do you do about this COVID vaccine if we do have to get it every year? Does that continue to have to, you have to keep these mobile vaccine sites up forever? How does that work?
So how real is the hesitancy in minority communities about getting the vaccine? And I say that aware of just the historical, of what happened historically, but also measured with just how the toll that minority communities have taken in this pandemic, which, they've just been hit so much harder, just than the overall population. How real is that right now? And are people just weighing whether they want to get it? Can you just talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really real. You know what I mean? When I talk to doctors, they want to, and health experts, they want to make sure we're not overselling it, right? All of this is not about that hesitancy. There's that access issue. However, it's this historical nature of what happened, right? There's the Tuskegee experiment. There's all these other things that doctors and healthcare people did to Black people for decades in this country, doing all types of experiments. And those are things I remember as a kid being talked about. My family always gets the flu vaccine, but I know cousins that don't. I have cousins that do not, and they're like, why would you let them do this to us again, but every year? And you know what I mean? Hold on. And then there is this, still to this day, Black women, a lot of Black women, when they go to hospitals and they say, when they're pregnant, they have an issue during their pregnancy, and even when they're about to give birth, and they talk about all these pains, doctors don't always listen to them. And it wasn't a long time ago when doctors used to think that Black people didn't feel as much pain, right? That was a part of that they were taught in school. And as a Black person, we do, all the time, if anyone is still wondering. And so this hesitancy is also backed up by all this historical stuff, but also how people are treated today. And that is something that doctors say is hard to get over because, the doctors are not a diverse group of people. So why would, it's really important to look at someone who looks like you, right? Representation always matters. If someone who looks like you is saying, take this vaccine, this is going to work, we're not experimenting on you, this is good, that is easier to accept than if it's someone who doesn't look like you and you have no reason to trust maybe. And it's difficult. I don't know. It's going to be a difficult test for the Biden administration to do that PR campaign aspect of this.
Yeah, I wonder if I feel like I listened to Dr. Fauci saying by fall, 75 to 80% of Americans are going to be vaccinated, and then take your masks off, as you're saying, go to that concert, go back to work. But, we are all in this together, right? If only one community is getting this vaccine at a high rate, it doesn't work, right? Everyone needs to kind of get on board. The same way if just Americans get this vaccine and other countries are left out, it doesn't work either, because then you get these crazy mutations that eventually come back. Really fascinating. I want to now just talk a little business. Twitter released its earnings after the close yesterday. A wild quarter. Of course, they banned the president from the platform. Despite this, though, Twitter said they saw a 27% increase in user growth last year. There are warnings, though, it's going to be hard to keep up this level of growth after the election and post-pandemic. If we could ever get there. So Twitter is experimenting with a lot of stuff. They recently launched Fleets, similar to Instagram Stories. They also released this beta test of Spaces. It's this audio chat room feature similar to Clubhouse. Speaking of which, Mark Cuban reportedly working on a similar type of app where hosts can talk to fans live and monetize their conversations. I just keep hearing all about Clubhouse these days. Eugene, are you on Clubhouse? And just wondering if you think audio, as we're doing a podcast now, is the next big thing in social media, which is kind of ironic because audio has been around forever.
Literally, we don't have a lot of new ideas, it seems, around here. Right? Like, we just keep kind of recycling them. I am on Clubhouse, literally only because everyone was getting on it, and we're starting to see like the members of the administration get on there, right? Simone Sanders, the senior spokesperson for the vice president, who I cover, was on there. I think Ron Klain had a conversation on Clubhouse. It's just like, you kind of have to go where the people are, and the people being the people who I cover. I have to be honest, I hate new things on social media. So like I hate it. I feel like an old man because once you get used to something, like I already got used to these weird fleets, which I already did not like. And I think I used it once because I like my Instagram stories. I like to keep it normal. Remember when Snapchat was a thing? Do people still use Snapchat? Maybe they do.
Believe it or not, Snapchat's doing pretty well, even though it's like under the radar well.
I feel like it's probably the younger people who are the same TikTok people are probably using Snapchat at this point. That's probably who it is.
I am not.
I think I used it a lot. I literally, same. So I think, Twitter, Jack, stick to what you know, get out of Spaces. I do think that this idea of audio coming back, kind of, is so interesting, right? Like podcasts have had this huge boom over the years, especially when people used to be able to commute, right? Like it's like you put on music or you put on a podcast. But I think what's interesting about Clubhouse is it gives people who aren't just celebrities and can, do the production on a podcast. It gives them this space to have super complex conversations and debate, right? Like you go on Clubhouse. I think right now you still have to be kind of invited, so you feel like part of the cool kids. And you have to, and people can have all these conversations about race and gender identity and sexual orientation, and it gets kind of intense. And I think there's some kind of like fluffy things that happen too, right? Conversations about which celebrity's better, et cetera. And I'm sure there's some downside to just like listening to a bunch of people talk all the time. But I think that it's fascinating. I like Clubhouse personally. I don't know if everyone needs to get into doing their own version of it, but I think like the original, the Clubhouse, of giving people this space, which, at some point we're going to be past this pandemic. Will all these audio things where you have to be able to like sit at home and have these conversations during the day work, right? That's where they're going to probably run into some issues. But any venue where people can, average people can go and have a conversation and talk about whatever they want, I'm on board for, even if I don't understand how to use it because I'm old in the head.
I feel like the thing about it too is like I just what you as you were talking, I thought about there's like room for nuance again. I think that when you are just so used to Twitter, where it's however I don't even know what the character count that's allowed anymore is. It's just everyone's just trying to like get in with like these snarky quick comments. At the very least, whatever you may think of Clubhouse or whatever, I'm not on it. At least there's room for real discussion. And it is to the point where like it's like this cool kids club where I was gonna actually write on our group Slack, like, is anyone on Clubhouse who can invite me? And I just thought I might get like mocked to no end. So I just decided not to, and I will wait for somebody else to send me an invite. I wanted
someone to open the door for you.
And I did want to just end on this update to a story that's gone viral. We haven't really talked about this on the pod yet, but Tessica Brown, who is the woman who put Gorilla Glue in her hair, reportedly managed to chop off her ponytail, according to TMZ. She and a friend actually used super glue remover, and apparently it's to work on the ponytail for 4 hours. If you are not familiar with this story, Brown went viral because she ran out of her usual hairspray and then she used super glue instead, and her hair was actually stuck in place for a month. Plastic surgeons have offered to help. Beyonce's hairstylist has offered to help. She was interviewed by TMZ yesterday. Eugene, I know you are kind of like super obsessed with this story, right?
Obsessed. Obsessed. I am very online though. I'm a nerd, so I stick to, I know, Instagram and Twitter. And so this is where I saw this. And from the very beginning, it had everything you could want, right? It had like drama. It had like, this, the beauty industry. It had someone doing something that you're kind of like, wait, girl, why? But why'd you do that? Which is all you want in kind of like a juicy social media thing. Even Gorilla Glue has had to come out and kind of say something. They got a little backlash, actually, from this by people were saying they weren't empathetic enough. They basically were like, girl, we said don't put it on your skin and scalp is skin, right? So like there's this conversation happening about like how companies should be talking to people who, may misuse what they're using. But Beyonce, I'm a huge Beyonce stan. Beyonce walking encyclopedia, I like to call myself. And so her hairstylist is like, girl, we'll make you wigs. We're seeing like celebrity, like Black and brown celebrity saying, we're praying for you, like all on her Instagram. I'm sure she wasn't expecting this to be how she got famous, Tessica Brown. But it has also started this really interesting conversation among Black women about kind of like how when a Black woman makes a mistake, why do they feel like they get dehumanized quicker, right? Like they're like calling her Gorilla Glue girl and all of these things, which I'm guilty of as well, right? Like I've been paying attention to the story the whole time. And so this entire, I guess we're in a different year, thank God, but 2020 was like a lot about, Black people saying like, no, hear us. And Black women are taking this opportunity to say, this is kind of funny, obviously everybody, but also like, remember that this is a human. But I just, watching her try to wash the glue, it's like I'm so stressed for her still. And it's like, are there long-term effects of this? When you have to shave your head, can the hair grow back? Is she wearing Beyonce's old wigs forever? Which honestly, I would sign up for myself. So if that's her life, I feel like it's gonna be good. But it seems like it's on the right track for her. And this chapter will close for us.
I think you make a good point, right? I think that there's sort of the visual aspect of it, or like just the shock value, that part of it that does make a good story. But I think when you get below the surface a bit, I'm thinking of also like the cost of beauty or the price of beauty, right? And like what women and what Black women in particular go through to put on a face to the world, and it's just it's a fascinating it's just a fascinating way to get into that conversation. Who would have thought?
Really and one that no one expected.
It's very I was gonna say it's very 2020, but it's like it's 2021 and it's 2020. It's still happening.
It's the effects of 2020. I feel like anytime something bad happens for the rest of our lives, we're gonna be like, it's 2020. People are like, it's 2036, Dad. Like that is no longer how it is. Like when she was tapping her head because it was like so stiff, and then she did a different video and she was like trying to show us like the shampoo, it doesn't move. I used to work in video, like my background is primarily in video, and so I'm just like, oh my God, this is so good. Like I'm gonna get as close as I possibly can to my phone, because it is this like, we have this, especially now that we're all at home, we all know what everyone's apartment looks like. And so this fascination with people in their space, having things happen to them under all of these kind of things that keep popping up. But I wish Tessica Brown all the luck, because she needs it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, unfortunately, that is a wrap on the podcast. Eugene, it was so great to have you on. Really appreciate your time this morning. And that is what you need to know for Wednesday, February 10th.
Thanks so much for having me. Anytime. This was much more fun.
Thanks, Eugene. Bye, everybody.